Welcome back, Mr. Owl here. Just a side note, I'm still fighting off this chest infection, so if I take a quick pause in my recording, that's because I'm coughing with my mic turned off for a sec, so just forgive me. In this lesson, the final one for this section, I'm going to be going over how to get that in-air idle animation to work like I showed you in the original video. And to do this, we need to consider three things. So number one is that I want the in-air animation to win. Meaning that when Mario is in the air, I want him animating like he's spinning. No matter which direction I'm moving, no matter if I'm pressing a key or not, I want the animation to win. You could consider programming the animation differently, but just for this particular project, this is the way I decided to do it, so we'll work through the Boolean logic for that scenario. The second thing I need to consider is that it shares an animation with idle. It's just faster. So I need some logic to swap between the two. I need the logic to swap between the two different idle animations. Okay? And finally, I need, to make sure it doesn't break anything else. So something to always keep in the back of our minds. I don't want to break into the other animations in doing so. And so I have to be careful. This is the trickiest logic we've done so far. I'm going to step you through how I kind of set it up, but I highly recommend that you kind of try to implement it on your own if you haven't already after you've seen my video, just so you can work through it in a little bit more depth. One thing that's going to help us is this is grounded Boolean that we added, but I have to add in a second one, primarily to consider this scenario where it's sharing an animation with idle. Okay. Actually, now that I consider it, there's one more thing we have to consider, a fourth thing potentially, which is, if you recall, the reason that we added in this code, animation is not already right when I'm processing the right animation, it's not already left, is because we got stuck on frame 0 when doing so. That's a risk again. Don't get stuck on frame 0. So I need to make sure these things are all working. I actually might change these spots just because of the precedence. They're not breaking anything else. It's kind of like our side back thought. So I want the inner animation to win. I'm going to consider this first. So I already have the in is grounded Boolean, and in my Mario animator, because I want this to win, logically that means I should be putting it at the top of my code. So how am I going to say if I'm in the air? Well, if is not grounded. I can utilize that Boolean I made before. If I'm not grounded, logically that means I'm in the air. So if I'm not grounded, what do I want to have happen? Well, I can reference my beautiful modular method here. I want to run the idle animation. Before I ran it at 50 really slow, this time I want to run it at 1 really fast, high speed animation. So if not grounded, process animation, idle, that should get that up and running here. Let's see if it works. My Grandpa's been having trouble compiling when I'm doing this live, so we'll see if it actually updates properly. And you'll notice that now on the ground, my animations work fine, but in the air, they're stuck on frame 0 from whatever it is that I'm doing. And they're also not swapping between things properly. There's things that are still kind of going a little bit wrong here. So let's think about what's going on here. My series of if statements. If I'm not grounded, process this animation. No matter if this runs or not, Greenfoot's still going to look at this, and then it's still going to look at this, and it's still going to look at this, because they're all separate if statements. If I want this to win, and if this happens for nothing else to occur, I need to chain these together. Notice Greenfoot shows it visually, that blue background has linked them all together with else ifs. I want only one of these things to be happening at one time. If I'm not grounded, process my idle animation and the spinning thing, and then I don't want anything else to run. So I shouldn't be seeing the left and right happening if my compiler is working fine. While I'm in the air, notice, yeah, left and right aren't being processed. It's the first idle animation. So I've now, to a certain degree, succeeded in I want the animation to win, no matter what direction I'm moving, no matter if I'm pressing a key or not. looks like I have that idle animation being accessed. So once we can kind of consider this maybe resolved, but here's a problem that we don't have. Don't get stuck on frame 0. So I need to have a trigger so that I'm not stuck on frame 0. We're going to use the same trigger for something, open up, in a little bit. So I'm going to toss it in and use it for this for now. A new Boolean. I'm going to call this idle swapper. This is going to allow me to swap between the two different idle animations. It's also going to help me not infinitely loop on the 0 frame in my Mario animator. So what I'm going to say here is my idle swapper is going to equal, let's just say false in this scenario. And this is only allowed to run if idle swapper equals true. Or I can just say idle swapper. So if idle swapper is available, then you can set this animation up and then immediately set it to false so this doesn't keep on infinitely running. Now for this to run the first time I do things here, I need for this to be able to turn idle swapper on at some other point in time that wouldn't mess with this. So let me think about this for a sec. If when I'm in the air, I want this to run. So I want idle swapper to be true when I'm entering the air. So I think a logical spot to put this would be if I am just about to launch into the air. Oops. Set idle swapper to true. So idle swapper becomes true when I hit spacebar. And then that allows this to run once, and then this cancels it from running more times for that infinite loop. So that when I'm in the air, I should see the idle animation playing out. And it looks like, oh, my compiler. It didn't compile properly again. Yeah, my greenfoot's broken here. So let's, I'll continue with the logic of this and we'll hope that it fixes itself. And I can kind of switch things around in a couple minutes if we need to check something else here. So tentatively, we've now dealt with a couple of those problems relatively well, except that, oh, you know what? I'm wrong. This isn't the compiler problem. This is me jumping ahead of myself. The problem now is that this isn't going to run because idle swapper is false. So this won't run the second time. So after it sets it initially, it's going to go, this is not working, so now check this out. And it's going to go, oh, am I moving? Is the animation not right? And I might set the animation. So I've reverted it back to my in the air not having priority, not winning. I've nullified this, which I kind of succeeded at earlier by adding, basically solving this, broke this. It's okay. We can get this to work. So I need to also think about limiting these guys in different scenarios. And the best way that I can do this is I want this to run when it's in the air. I want these to run when I'm on the ground. Cool. So now I can set my animation in the air and it won't be turned off. It won't swap to anything else until I'm grounded. So what that actually put in place now, I should see, is that the spin works in the air. And once I reach the ground, it turns off. Now I still have a bit of an issue with when I let go of left or right, it's switching back to the original idle frame. So where am I at in this processing of my different steps? I've got the in air to win over the left and the right moving. And the in the air looks like the spinning's working. It's not stuck on frame 0, but the sharing with the idle is still having some issues. So I need to think about how I might have my code be able to swap back and forth between these two different things. And so I'm going to add a little bit of Boolean logic into my idle here. I just want to check on one thing down here. Idle swapper, cool. So I want this not to run when, or not to mix up things with idle when this thing is in the air. So I got to think about its trigger being accessed. And so what I'm going to say is that this can only run when its version of the trigger has been accessed. So the first idle animation is waiting for idle swapper to be on. This one is waiting for idle swapper to be off. That's how I can kind of jump back and forth between which one I'm accessing if there's ever any discrepancy. And so one thing that I can say here, I want to be able to actually jump back and forth between these different animations when I'm on the ground as well. And so in here, I'm going to add some code, and I'll explain this in a sec. I'm going to set idle swapper to false here. I'm going to set idle swapper to false here. And I'm going to set idle swapper to true in here. And let me just think about this for 1 sec. If it's compiling all right, what we should see is that when we're in the air, no matter what else I press, that the animation runs, and that when I'm back on the ground, my idle animation works again. All these things are separate from one another. When I'm on the ground, left and right work. When I'm in the air, the animation runs no matter which keys. I can switch back and forth, and it runs just fine. I'm on the ground, still again, the idle animation works. So everything is distinctly working where I want it to. So what is it that I changed here by adding in these different idle swapper things? Well, let me see if I can talk you through in the last bit of this video here. The idle swapper must be on to set the in-air animation, and it must be off to set the on-the-ground animation. I turn it off after I've set the in-air animation. Why doesn't it automatically change to idle? Because the rest of them are waiting to hit the ground. So once this is expecting it to be true, once this has been processed, this animation will be the animation that runs until I hit the ground again. Set is grounded to true, and only then will any of these be able to run. So this guarantees that while I'm in the air, only the animation runs, which is awesome. So now when I'm on the ground, I need a way for me to be able to switch between these different scenarios without breaking how the other functionality works. And so I'm looking for idle swapper to be false. Now note this is the bottom level piece of logic. So if I'm holding, let's say, D for going right when I hit the ground, then it's going to set it to the right animation. Or if I'm holding left, it's going to set it to the left animation. But if I'm not holding any keys, then it's going to go, am I holding no keys? Or none of the two that move otherwise? And am I on the ground? And is idle swapper false, which it should be if I was recently in the air. If so, set it to true so that this doesn't repeat infinitely. Setting it true is the limiter for this running again and again. A problem with that though is that once this is set to true, then if I ran, let's say, moving to the right, and I let go, it wouldn't run the idle animation again because idle swapper has to be false for it to run on the ground. So I have to set it to false for each of the other ground ones for that to be able to swap over for the on the ground movement. And when I press jump, I set idle swapper to true. And by doing that, I enable this to run once, looking for idle swapper to be true, which sets the animation. And then none of these will run into hit the ground again, guaranteeing the animation works in the air. So there we go. A bunch of different triggers and switches that I put in place. The net result being that I have a Mario. While he's in the air, he spins, no matter what else I'm doing. He has a limited jumping. When I'm on the ground, he transitions instantly into his other animations, and if I stop, wherever on the screen, his idle animation runs. Wonderful. The last challenge of this section, where you limit his jump height, I'm going to leave for you to wrestle with on your own. And in the next series of tutorials, after we talk about some things in class, we are going to go over actually adding in platforms. But in between now and then will be a challenge task for you to add in an enemy with its own unique movement functionality, implementing some more of this logic that you'll be graded on. Looking forward to seeing your work. Read the instructions in our team's assignment area. We'll talk to you guys soon.